Well, Don, I was about to ask you if you feel at home here, but there's half a chance you'll upset some football fans in this part of the world if you say that, isn't there?
Well, I'd feel equally at home sat out at the Hawthorns pitch side as I do right here, but you know, that's the way it is for me, Bob, and you know, I constantly get asked which one of the two do I prefer, and the answer remains the same and always will. They're both in my heart and they always will be, and I love them both equally, because what the supporters did for me in very different circumstances was something that I will always be grateful for.
Do you get grief from either sets of fans these days?
Sometimes. It's in isolation. I think because I played for Wolves after West Bromwich Albion, the grief mainly belongs to the West Bromwich Albion fans who accuse me of loving Wolves more than I love them. They're absolutely wrong, you know. But it's one of those things that I deal with, and usually people just accept it, and you know, it's spoken with heart and spoken with truth.
At the time you were playing, how aware were you of the rivalry between these two?
It became obvious the minute really Wolves got themselves into the same division as West Bromwich Albion, the second tier, because obviously for the first couple of seasons at West Bromwich Albion while I was there, Wolves were in the fourth tier, and then a certain Mr. Steve Bull, MBE, don't forget the MBE, Bob, brilliant. He propelled them along with much assistance from the other players, but from the second tier through the third tier and into the same league as West Brom, and it was at that moment when the derby games came around that I truly realised what the rivalry was and what it meant.
Because of course, you know, you are, I have to remind you, just about old enough to remember the days of football hooliganism, aren't you? It was a terrible blight on the game, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, I grew up in Leeds, and I was a ball boy at Ellen Road, and right in the middle of when hooliganism was particularly rife. And I remember being a ball boy at one end of the ground behind the goal, and supporters literally climbing over the fence to get onto the pitch, and I had to run for it. It was very scary.
And I mean, as a young kid there, I mean, what did you think? I mean, were you just sort of thinking, I've got to get out of this?
Well, it was just a scary situation. I saw all the other ball boys making their way towards the tunnel, and I was pretty quick in those days, fortunately. So I legged it to the tunnel and got there.
What were your early days like, your upbringing in Leeds?
From a football sense, football was my salvation, really. I lived on a council estate in Leeds, grew up, we didn't have too many pennies, but everybody was in the same boat, in and around me. And all we did was go to school and play football in the school breaks, the lunch hour, the afternoon break, straight home from school and straight out. And obviously in those days there were plenty of areas where it was safe for sort of youngsters to, I'd say, kick a ball around. We would kick anything around, a tin can, a tennis ball, anything you want.
How soon did you realise that you probably had got a bit more skill than the average?
I started as a goalkeeper, Bob.
Really?
Yeah, well, I did both, but I thought I was a better goalkeeper, really. And when I came to the age of sort of 11, 12, 13, I was trying out for the Leeds City schoolboy team, and being told the same thing. You know, you are an excellent goalkeeper, you're just too small. And the ball in those days obviously would fly over your head, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, yeah, on a Sunday I did play out and score a few goals. So I never for a second thought I was ever good enough to become a professional footballer, but I went back as a right winger and had the trials the following year, and got into the Leeds City schoolboy squad and saw that out through to the under-16s.
So who saw you then? Who was the man who said, you know, I think we can make something out of you?
I was a gentleman by the name of Ken Parkin. He was the manager of a team in the Northern Counties East League called Collingham, which is just outside Wetherby, and he had been told that there were 3 or 4 of us playing for a Sunday League team called Winkover Boys on the outskirts of Leeds that were worth looking at, and we were 15 years old, and he came to see us once and signed 3 of us, and from there all 3 of us played for Leeds City Schoolboys. All 3 of us then went into, at the age of 15, into the big wide world of open age football, which which was a big learning curve, obviously, playing against seasoned professional, seasoned men at that level. You can't help but learn, especially in those days when they were allowed to kick you.
And how quickly did you think, yes, I mean, because you were what, 16 or so, 17 when you made your debut, weren't you, at Bradford?
Well, I was one of these guys that I was never assigned to a professional club. I didn't sign schoolboy forms with anybody, and all of those around me, and certainly in the Leeds City schoolboy squad, I think there was one other lad and myself that weren't attached to a professional club, and the feedback I always got was that I was a little bit small and skinny, and probably wasn't going to develop enough to stand the rigours of professional football. Obviously, I'm not small and skinny now, so...
I was going to say, you proved them wrong, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't about proving anybody wrong. I mean, for me, like I said, my way of sort of looking at the situation was that I probably was just a bit short of quality to become a professional footballer anyway, and just try and get to the best level that you can. And it came about where Ken Parkin got me a trial at Bradford City at the age of 16, and I played in a trial match against another open age team for Bradford City Juniors, and we won 3-2, and I scored a hat-trick, and Roy McFarlane instantly offered me an apprenticeship. But by this time I had become an apprentice electrician with Leeds City Council. Nothing to do with the hair, by the way. It was a great job, and it was a job for life. And Ken Parkin was a guy with his finger on the pulse of professional football, and he told me that the stats, and I think the stats are probably about the same now. 10% of trainees will probably go on and make a good living out of the game. Not good enough odds for me, Bob, so I turned that apprenticeship down, which was quite a brave thing to do, really. Carried on with my electrics, but Bradford signed me on what's called a non-contract basis, and so I was able to play for their junior team, reserve team, and first team. As it turned out, I was still an electrician when I made my debut at 17, whilst not being officially signed up as a professional or as an apprentice professional.
And how was it then at such a young age, getting into professional football? How did you find the people around you?
It was a wake-up call, that's for sure. I mean, it's very different now. The game was very, very different when I was 18. In that Bradford City dressing room were 15, 20 characters. Now you're lucky if you've got 2 or 3 characters in each dressing room. There were 15, 20 of them, and you learnt a lot in different aspects of the game, on the pitch and off the pitch, from those guys, Stuart McCall, John Hendry, Bobby Campbell, Peter Jackson, to name but 4, but I could name you the whole squad, Bob, and in their own way, each single one of them had a big influence on me, not just as a footballer, but as a person.
I'm not saying you found it in the dressing room, but did you, as a young footballer, encounter much prejudice at all?
No, I was quite lucky, really. 2 instances stand out to me. We were playing a home League Cup game at Valley Parade, and I was a substitute, and I got up and ran up and down the touchline to warm up, and away to my right I was spotted by the away fans, and I'm not going to name and shame the club because obviously it wouldn't be fair. Times have moved forward in a positive sense, and they started singing these chants to me, which was a real shock as an 18-year-old youngster that hadn't really, fortunately, had encountered too much prejudice in his life, really. I think I was probably well protected from that by family and friends and, you know, things like that. So that was the one instance, and the only time it was ever used on a football pitch was an away game at Southend, and again, I'm not going to name and shame the player, although I probably could, but I won't. He used the N-word, and the referee was stood a couple of yards away, and I immediately turned to him and said, "You heard that? I know you heard that." And he shook his head nervously and ran away. So those were the only two times, and you know, I think I was one of the lucky ones. You know, you only have to look at our sort of near people, heroes, likes of Cyril Regis, Brendan Batson, you know, those boys, John Barnes, those were the ones that had to really stay strong and come through it. And if they hadn't have done that, then who's to say where we'd be now?
But you have always been a man who could have diffused a situation with words. I mean, you would have always turned around and said something, wouldn't you, to somebody? But can I say, in a constructive sort of way? Well,
you would try to see reason with people. There is a difference in quite controversial really, but you know, in my youth some of my friends used to call me a black bee, and I took no offence, because I used to call them a Scottish bee or a this or a that, and you know, but then there are the real people who say it with feeling and truly mean it. They're ignorant, Bob. That's the long and the short of it. So can you really turn somebody that has that ignorance built into them, and with great difficulty, I would suggest.
Has that gone completely out the game now?
No, I don't think so. I think we still get the odd, unfortunately, the odd isolated instance, but what does happen now is it gets stamped on very, very quickly by the players. Aren't afraid to report it. Authorities aren't afraid to deal with it, although I'm sure in the case of UEFA and FIFA, they could be a lot stronger on racism than they actually are. But slowly but surely, I don't think anybody can deny that things have improved for the better, but without taking your finger off the pulse. You know, you must never think that the job's done, because if you do that, then things could deteriorate. So I think we're heading in a good direction.
We moved inside, we're in the Wolves dressing room now. Are all dressing rooms the same?
No, I don't think they are. I can only speak from the dressing room experiences that I had. I was fortunate enough to be in a lot of good dressing rooms, but dressing rooms are based on the characters that you have within them, and not all characters are the same, certainly not in those days. So you know, I was very lucky to be in some great dressing rooms. Like I say, on reflection, probably the best dressing room I was ever in was probably the first one, which was Bradford City. Not by much, because I was lucky enough to be in some great dressing rooms at West Bromwich Albion, at Sunderland, at Wolves, at Walsall. You know, where there were lots and lots of characters, but the reason that they weren't the same were because those characters were different.
I was just thinking, some of the people you played with here at Wolves, I mean, they were characters, weren't they?
You could say that, yeah. Yeah, there were lots and lots of characters, and probably different to how people might imagine. But I do think in those days a dressing room was almost a sanctuary for players. It certainly should be now, given the glaring media coverage that there is on modern day players. But it was a place where you didn't have to worry about what you said and political correctness and things like that, and you know, an awful lot of fun, an awful lot of banter.
When you walk past the dressing room now, which you know I do on Saturdays during the winter, all you hear is extremely loud music being played. I'm just thinking there must be some players who actually don't want that. They want to sit in a corner, they want to be quiet.
There may well be. I guess it's the law of majority rule, really. I suppose if most of the lads want loud music on and find it as a motivation, then a coach or a manager is happy for them to have that, even if that coach or manager, I'm sure is mainly the case, doesn't actually even like the music that's being blasted out. But you know, I mean, I used to put loud music on in the car driving to games and just wind myself up a little bit that way, within reason. But you're right, no, players prepare in very, very different ways. And if you are somebody that wants to find peace and quiet somewhere, I'm sure, whether it might be a physio room or a gym or, you know, a warm-up area, you should be able to do that in modern day football.
You say about how managers react. I'm kind of imagining Mick McCarthy's reaction to some of the music that might come blaring out. He would have his say about it, wouldn't he?
You would imagine he would. But given the success that Mick has had in his managerial career, he's clearly got the balance right, whatever that may be.
Just going back across the career then, those early days at Bradford, it was what, 83 when you made your your debut for them. You were a young man then, weren't you? Did you feel, hey, I've done it now, or did you feel huge pressure on yourself?
No, we've discussed how sort of 10% of apprentice or trainee footballers make the grade. Nobody in and around me was going to ever allow me to believe that I'd made the grade. I was probably wasn't till I was at West Bromwich Albion and scoring a lot of goals at a decent level that I thought, well, I should be able to go on and have a decent career.
So you were what, 17 when you first played for Bradford?
Yeah, still an electrician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you? I mean, what were your thoughts about playing then? I mean, did you feel very much the new boy, or did that dressing room welcome you so much?
Well, fortunately for me, I'd played for Bradford City Juniors, and during that period, I'd played with Stuart McCall, Mark Ellis, Greg Abbott. We had a good team. So Tony Clegg, there were a few of the lads that actually had made their way, and they were. A couple of them were very established within that first team anyway, so they were very, very quick to put their arm around me and make me welcome and calm the nerves and you know, guide me, so to speak. And that is a massive part of what a football dressing room is, when a new person comes in, whether they're youngsters coming through or whether they're somebody that's been transferred from another club. It is about welcoming them with open arms and making them feel comfortable in order to get the best out of them. Well, of course, the other lads that didn't know me would have known that I was still an electrician, and you know, it was a lovely story. It was sort of back page news in the local papers, the Yorkshire Evening Post, as I recall, and the Bradford Telegraph and Argus, that this young boy that was still an electrician was going to be given his debut by Trevor Cherry. So it was nervy. But we won against Newport County.
I was going to say, you remember that game?
Don't remember a lot about it. I remember the score. I remember coming off the bench. Probably remember the ball bouncing off my shins a couple of times. End of season pitches and all. And having a couple of decent runs and doing okay. Not spectacular, just okay.
How long did it take you to cement your place in that team then?
Well, they signed me as a professional that summer when I turned 18, and then the following season I played 33 games as an 18-year-old, scored 7 goals, so that was a good start, and obviously we won the league, but then we had the tragedy that was to strike, and everything paled into insignificance, really.
11th of May 85, we've just had the anniversary. I do recall some extraordinarily impressive comments that came from Trevor Cherry and Terry Yorath, who ran the team at the time, saying, you know, it was a game of football. You were presented with the championship before the game.
We were.
I mean, what was the first moment you realised there was a problem?
It was quite a while afterwards, really. Initially, it started as a small fire in the corner. I was going to present a raffle on the pitch at half-time. I was injured, so I wasn't playing in the game, and you know, I was, again, you've touched on the hooliganism. I was thinking, oh, hooligans again, they're going to spoil the party, sort of thing, blah, 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 blah. Before you knew it, the stand was on fire, but I was outside the stadium by this point, and of course, you could not begin to imagine the devastation that was unravelling before your eyes. You know, I went out and I went up to the top of the hill, and you know, I think you almost took it for granted that everybody had got out safely, but of course they didn't. 56 people lost their lives, and several hundred people's lives would change forever. So it's a blur, Bob. I have to be honest. It's a blur in the back of my memory. I've probably confined it there for sanity reasons, and it's not something that I talk frequently about, but you know, I think it's a painful experience. I think a lot of people realise that I got 2 tickets for 2 young girls that didn't get out, and that will stay with me forever.
Your father and brother were in the game as well, weren't they?
They were.
Did you suddenly think, hey, I've got family, I've got friends in that stand?
I can't remember the timeline afterwards, but obviously there comes a point where you do start to worry because you can't find people and you can't get in contact with people, and you know, yeah, there was a lot of worry for a lot of people, not just myself, on that day. And you know, I can only really say the support that we all received from the whole community and beyond gave us strength, really. We had to go to a lot of funerals and a lot of memorials, and I think from that day forward, Bradford City players were playing for 56 people and those affected and their families, as well as themselves, and I'm sure that probably remains the case today.
I can't even begin to imagine that you go into a game like that, you've won the title. It was the first thing they'd won since 1911 when they won the FA Cup. I can't imagine how everybody dealt with it. Players, anybody.
Well, it was difficult. It was very, very difficult. You needed your family and you needed your close circle of friends and you needed your teammates, and we were there for each other. And, you know, we spoke about how important football dressing rooms were, particularly, you know, in that generation. And you were like a band of brothers, and, you know, we all became even closer. We were very close as it goes anyway, but we became even closer, and we remain close to this day. We have reunions and things, and you know, like I say, it's just a very, very painful experience that nobody connected with it will ever forget.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something you can or would ever dwell on, but I guess that when it comes around to the 11th of May every year, it's 30 years ago, but every year, there must be a moment in your day when you think.
I think everybody in life has things that have happened to them in the past, situations, events that are poignant to them, and you know, whatever they may be. Obviously, the 11th of May for everybody connected with that day will always be there, and I think the football community have extended you know, the situation, and by marking it with you know, silences and respect and, you know, tributes, etc., as the football community does. Unfortunately, it's not the only tragedy to strike football, but you know, one of the real positives about the football community is that in situations like that, shirt colours, team colours go out the window. It doesn't matter. You know, everybody comes together as one big family and pays their respects and gives tribute.
As they did this year, of course, particularly 30 years on. Have you ever been to some of these events yourself when they've had them? Yeah,
I've been to some of the events. The 25th anniversary was at Valley Parade. I managed to get myself across there. But generally, Bob, it's been quiet moments that I have sat and had thoughts and said prayers and had for myself. Usually, it's smack bang in the middle of playoff season. And that in itself highlights how life has to go on and how people would have wanted life to go on. And, you know, so usually I find myself at a game and standing in silence and tribute along with the rest of the crowd that are at that particular football game.
Because I suppose, as you said earlier, as the time goes on, it doesn't get any easier to deal with this, does it? You may you used the phrase, you said you've kind of almost blanked it out, but
it's
you haven't, have you really?
No, it's the fine details that I can't remember. Obviously the situation will always remain. The fine details are a blur. People tell me when it comes to that time of year, little intricate details, little things that happened that I had forgotten in the haze, really. But of course, in terms of the big picture and the event itself, and that will never go away, no.
Of course, you were only, what, 19 at the time, weren't you? I mean, it's very young to be faced with something like that. You must have been the baby in the team, I suspect.
I was the baby of the team. I don't think age matters, really, when it's something like that. It's a tragedy, and it doesn't matter how old you are. it's a painful experience, and we all deal with it in different ways. That is the one thing that, you know, I can say with certainty, is that everybody in life that experiences difficult times have different ways of dealing with them.
It was your first club, but I suspect it's possibly part of the reason why you still have what's clearly a terrific affection for Bradford City.
Well, of course, young boy, first club, making his way, wins league title in first season, thinks this is great, love this professional football malarkey, and then of course everything changes in those few short moments. But you know, I think everybody will always have affection for their first club, but you know, it's that is the club and the manager and the players that gave you a chance. And certainly Bradford City I owe an enormous amount to as a club, the people that were there at the time, the fans, because they gave me my professional break. And obviously, who knows, without that I may not be sat here talking to you.
You left Bradford in 1987. Was that an easy decision to make?
It was, really. West Bromwich Albion had just been relegated from the top division. Ironically, they were a club that I'd always liked from being a boy because of my father. Was a big fan because of the Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham, Brendan Batson effect. So I had always followed West Bromwich Albion. Who can forget some of them fantastic games that were on Match of the Day and so on and so forth. So, so it was a club that I had affinity with already. It was with respect to Bradford City, it was a much bigger club than Bradford City, and ironically, I was top scorer at Bradford. I think I'd scored eight goals in something like 16 appearances, but I'd been in and out of the team. New manager had come in, and all new managers have players that they fancy more than other players, and this particular manager hadn't, you know, thought I was more of an impact player and coming from the bench or whatever, so I wasn't getting the game time that I'd been used to for the first couple of seasons. So no, it wasn't a difficult decision.
And then it was Ron Saunders.
That was yes, you can imagine a 20-year-old youngster driving down the M6 in the driving down rain, knowing that he's going to face Ron Saunders to negotiate his contract, and not have an agent by his side. So it was me and Ron Saunders.
I wish I'd been there.
Yeah, it was slightly intimidating. Yeah, he was in charge from the moment I met him, shall we say.
I'm guessing that when he signed you, he made you think that he was doing you a favour.
Yeah, you know what, I knew he was doing me a favour anyway, so, but no, he was an interesting character that had been used to success. He had been brought to West Bromwich Albion to make wholesale changes, that is to get the old guard off the wage bill and try and get a few youngsters like me. So, you know, whatever sort of any West Bromwich Albion fans thought of him, he had a very difficult job to do, which he did. You know, and I suppose he paid £50,000 for me, and they later sold me for £900,000. So, you know, he did all right for them in many respects, that just being one of them.
You enjoyed your time there then?
At West Bromwich Albion, I loved my time. My only regret is that we weren't a better team, but they were the first supporters that put me on a pedestal and actually sang songs about me and, you know, idolised me, and I love them for that. I will always love them for that. I love the football club for that, but unfortunately we were a poor team in that era. I'm pleased to say they're a much more successful team now, but it would have been nice. People often come up to me, and Bob Taylor was bought as my replacement when I went off to Sunderland, and people often say, God, I wish you'd have played with Bob Taylor. The two of you would have made quite a formidable strike partnership. We'll never know, but no, I loved my time. I made more appearances for West Brom and scored more goals for them than any other club.
Dennis Smith took you to Sunderland. Bit of a different man to Ron Saunders, wasn't he?
Well, a hard man. So But yeah, Dennis had been allowed to break the club transfer record by double. I think the previous was Tony Norman for 450,000, and he'd put his faith in me, paid £900,000, and my debut right here, away at Molineux, which for a West Bromwich Albion ex-player was interesting. To say that I would get dog's abuse when I stepped off the team bus would be an understatement. But
and another hour and a half of it to come, eh?
Well, after 5 minutes, Bob, we were down to 9 men. So
right.
It's a game I won't forget. The amount of running I had to do, and we held out till the 89th minute until Paul Cook rifled a 30-yard screamer into the top corner. So yeah, I remember that game well. Not just for the on-field activities, but for the abuse that Wolves fans would give me. Well, they were to later make up for that, so we're okay with that.
Tell me this, before you went there, when the speculation in the papers that managers are looking at players and all the rest of it, players always say, and they've always said, oh, I take no notice of it. But you must do. I mean, you must have seen the stories. You must have thought, hey, nearly £1 million, Sunderland, oh, that'd be all right.
Well, I think first and foremost, all you want to do is to play at the highest level that you can, and you're looking for a vehicle that can get you there. That was my theory anyway, and it was never ever about money, because there wasn't the money in the game then anyway, but it was about how successful can I be. So the decision to leave West Bromwich Albion, who had been relegated and were in the equivalent of League One, and go to Sunderland, which was I'd played at Roker Park for the opposition many times, and it was some atmosphere, some place. And for, my theory was that if they're prepared to spend this on me, they really are going to go for it. I looked at the squad they had. I thought good players, chance of being up at the top end, and so we went for it. And unfortunately, was there for 3 years again. Very similar in many ways to my time at West Bromwich Albion. We weren't as good a team as I thought we were going to be. Got through several managers chasing success, and it just wasn't to be. It was just one of those things.
Again, when you get a change of manager, or 2 or 3, how unsettling is it for the dressing room? He's just been at the boardroom, he's been sacked, and I'm in charge for the moment. You're saying, yeah, right, okay, how long are you going to be here? But it was something that I personally got used to throughout my career. I noticed.
Something of a jinx, really. But I guess really that was because, particularly at West Bromwich Albion and Sunderland, we were teams that should have been doing better. We were big clubs with expectation and struggling for success. And therefore, even in those days, the urge from boards of directors was, this isn't working, let's change it. And it happened far too often, as far as I'm concerned. But it's almost normality now, isn't it, really? But no, I say you get used to it. You just adapt to the new guy's way of training, tactics, style of play, etc. And you are a professional footballer, and therefore you follow instruction to the best of your ability. And whilst unsettling at times, because you did grow close to managers, there's no question that you had affinity with certain managers. You didn't particularly like other managers, but certainly some of them that you had to say goodbye to, you had particular affinity for, and that was never easy.
And presumably, even if you didn't particularly get on with them, but you respected them professionally, you could get on with them in that way, couldn't you?
You could get on with them, but for me, you were never playing for that manager's success, for that manager's benefit. You were playing for yourself, you were playing for your teammates, you were playing for the fans, you were playing for the club, and the manager was just a small part of that mix. And if you as a team did well and you as a club did well, then of course the manager was, and rightly so, was going to take an awful lot of credit.
Did you get disenchanted then with life at Sunderland?
I couldn't see that it was going to get me to where I wanted to be, which by then, The Premier League had kicked in. It was a club that I loved. I mean, people talk about passion up there, Sunderland, Newcastle. And I think, unless you've experienced it, it's very, very hard to describe. So I had 3 amazing years up there. Again, fortunately, being loved by the fans, being put on a pedestal almost, and playing for a big club, which is another one that is very, very close to my heart. So I didn't get disenchanted per se, but I knew that if I was going to get in the Premier League, that I was scoring a lot of goals in a team that was, you know, mid-table at best, that I needed to move to pastures new and give myself the best opportunity of doing that.
What was the first you knew that Wolves might be interested in you?
Funnily enough, I was playing in a reserve game at Anfield, and I was hauled off at half-time by Mick Buxton. I thought, what's going on here? I'm playing well, I think I've scored. And he sat me down and he said, we've accepted a bid from Wolverhampton Wanderers.
First reaction?
Bring it on. Yeah, I mean, obviously I had yet to meet Graham Taylor, but Wolves were at the top of that league. Sunderland were in the middle of it. Wolves had Steve Bull, David Kelly. They'd invested in Steve Froggatt, Tony Daly, Jeff Thomas was at the club, to name but a few. And I saw nothing but success if I could be part of that. And actually the 2 wide boys were a big attraction, Daly and Froggatt, because I loved trying to get on the end of crosses at the least. And I imagined having too many crosses for comfort, really, and getting on the end of them. And of course, because of injury, that wasn't ever to be the case. But nevertheless, it wasn't a difficult decision, particularly once I'd met with Graham Taylor, who was one of the most inspirational men that I ever played for.
What was so special about him?
He had this aura, which almost demanded instant respect. And I'm sure you're sat here, you must have dealt with him many, many times. When he walked into a room, he was a presence. And there weren't loads and loads of managers that you could say that about. But, you know, I think anybody that watched the reality television programme when he was manager of one of those football teams would see how those players within his dressing room responded to him. Well, I've got nothing but praise to say about Graham Taylor. He brought me to this great football club, and he motivated me, and you know, I thank him for that.
So apart from needing a translator, you were destined to have a good relationship with Steve Bull, weren't you?
I still need a translator. Yeah, again, really, fate could have been a little kinder for he and I. Bully was getting to a point where his knees were starting to give him a little bit of trouble. But yeah, I think we played in an FA Cup game. This is what when people ask me about Steve Bull and the partnership that you had, I always revert to this FA Cup game away at White Hart Lane against Tottenham Hotspurs, and I think their central defenders were Gary Mabbott and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. But Gary Mabbott played for England, widely respected, fantastic Premier League defender, and we drew 1-1. And his post-match interview, bearing in mind this is the middle to back end of January, was to say that that was the hardest game that he had had all season, even though he had played against all the top Premier League teams. Those were his words, that me and Bully had given him the hardest time. And that's what we did. We made sure that even if we weren't on our game, even if, you know, our touch was off or we weren't firing on all cylinders, that at the very, very least, you can make it uncomfortable for the opposition, certainly for their defenders, and that's what he and I had great success in doing.
So you came back, or you came to Wolves. The last time you'd been presumably was that that fateful day when you'd left the team down the road and gone to Sunderland. But I mean, the crowd took to you here, didn't they?
But this is why, you know, I will be forever grateful to those fans, because here I was, a man that had played for the great enemy, so to speak, and they weren't quick to judge me. And as I recall, I played on the right wing for the first 6 months of my time here, because obviously Bully and David Kelly were doing very well, but Graham Taylor wanted to get me in the team. He had great success with Ian Ormonroyd, if you recall, at Aston Villa, by putting somebody that usually played, that was very strong in the air, out on a wing and hitting diagonal balls to him, and that became quite a weapon actually for us in the back end of that season. But getting back to the fans, yeah, so my point was that I didn't score for, I think, at least 6, maybe more, 7, 8 games. So it would have been easy for them to start sort of grumbling a little bit, paid a lot of money for this lad. But they didn't. They encouraged me, they stayed patient with me, and they supported with me. And they supported me, and I'll be forever grateful to them for that.
And were you to realise at the time, of course, you would play for one more Midlands team, because you had a spell at Walsall, didn't you?
Yeah.
Motherwell in between,
yeah.
and others. You enjoy Walsall, did you?
Excellent. Yeah, because they gave me, it's ironic really, you know, I win my first winner's medal at the age of 18 in my first season as a professional footballer. And there I am arriving at Walsall at the age of 34. But I'd turned 35 by the time we had that wonderful playoff success at the Millennium Stadium, which arguably was the highlight of my career. So little old Walsall gave me the highlight of my career, and what a day it was against all the odds that we would go and beat a very good Reading team and get Walsall into the Championship.
If there was one regret in your career, I presume it's that you didn't actually play in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, that's an obvious regret. I mean, there were numerous opportunities for me to play in the top division, i.e. numerous bids from clubs, several clubs. I know for a fact that Leeds United, which were my boyhood team, I would have walked up the road and probably played for them for nothing. They tried, I think, at least 3 times to get me. In those days, managers would say, we've had a bid from such and such a club, but you're not going anywhere. We want you to stay here. And that would be that. You would respect it, you'd say thanks for letting me know, and you'd knuckle down and crack on. Of course, football is a very different beast now, and a different animal, and the way things work is totally different. But yeah, that would be a regret, Bob. There is no question. And the other one would be, I would say, with respect, I probably played professionally for 1 year longer than I probably should. So those are 2, and if they're the only 2 regrets that I've got, then I can't
it's
really
not bad, is it?
Can't complain too much, can I?
Where do you stand on the fact that, particularly in the Premier League, it's absolutely saturated with players from abroad?
Mm-hmm.
They get accused of being mercenaries, perhaps unkindly at times, but they come for big money.
Mm-hmm.
And it prevents the development of some of the younger players. Is that a fair point?
Well, some of them are mercenaries, there's no question about that. Some of them are even happy to acknowledge that they've come for the money. But that's up to them, that's fine. And I have to say, a lot of them are not, and most of them are not. They are coming to the best league in the world to experience what the Premier League offers in terms of style of football, atmosphere in grounds. The smaller clubs can beat the bigger clubs more frequently than probably in any other league in the world. It's a world audience. So the game has just totally changed. With regards to the development of sort of British youngsters, I think there is a small problem there, but I don't see a solution, unfortunately, because I think European legislation would probably stop, for instance, football authorities saying you can only have so many in your match day team or in your squad because of restraint of trade, I guess. So I don't really know in that respect what we can do about that. All I do know is that I do think we've acknowledged that the way we've played the game, certainly internationally, is not been a style that is going to bring us a World Cup or a European Championship anytime soon. And therefore you can see the changes that are being made. More and more clubs are getting the ball down on the floor, playing the way we used to say the Continentals played, passing it, moving. it's great to watch. I love watching Swansea, for instance. They are an incredible story. You know, it's not that long ago they were a win away from going out of the Football League, and yet there they are, quite established in the Premier League, but doing it in a style which is admirable. So, yeah, I just think coaching in this country, we talk about British players, I think coaching, more quality coaches required, more ex-players of quality coaching and given an opportunity, and patience also. But as far as the Premier League, not many young players anymore get an opportunity in the Premier League. They go to Premier League clubs, they get sent on loan, they do well in the Championship or below, and then maybe go back to the parent club, and it's just the way it is at the moment. But like I say, you hope that with more and more making the breakthrough, that it encourages more and more and gives an opportunity for more and more coaches to give British players an opportunity.
And now, of course, working for Sky, you can have your say from the other side, can't you?
I do. I love it. Talking about coaching there, it was never something that I fancied doing, really. And I guess the truth is that my opportunity to become a coach or a manager probably would have been very low down the pecking order, League Two maybe. And the way managers are hired and fired these days, if you are made promises about resources and backing, and those promises don't come your way as a coach or a manager, and your team don't, well, then after 6 months you're out. And if I'm being elbowed out of a League Two club after 6 months of my short managerial career for failure, where do I go from there? That was partly the reason, and the other reason is that I do love the media side of things, and I do love the experience that working for Sky Sports gives me, going all around the country, giving my opinion on all kinds of different standards of games, and you know, hopefully it's something I can do for a long time yet.
So for somebody who was going to train as an electrician from that that house in Leeds, it's not gone too badly, has it?
I can't complain, no. Football has been wonderful to me. It's you know, there's no negatives as far as I'm concerned. That being a professional footballer has had only positives, and many, many of them.
Don Goodman, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Bob. Cheers.